Hello, I am the Jake Wheel. Welcome to Bad 90s Music. So if you've been following this show with any regularity, you may have noticed that as far as the genre that we've been covering for the music of the 90s, it's been pretty much rap, hip-hop, pop, R&B, alternative rock, and a little dance pop, maybe. But the one genre that I haven't really even approached yet is country, and it's not because I don't like country, it's more that I'm even less knowledgeable about country than I am about any of those other genres. Like here, I'm going to try to name every country artist I can think of that I can name more than one song by. Johnny Cash, Garth Brooks, Dolly Parton, Carrie Underwood, the band Perry. Oh, George Strait, that's another one. Ooh, Leanne Rimes? Reba McEntire. I think I can name one of her songs. The point is, it's just not something that I have much background in. It just wasn't what people listened to where I came from. I feel like to really appreciate the country, you have to live the country, sort of. I didn't spend a whole lot of time riding pickup trucks down dirt roads and shooting ducks or whatever they do in country songs. I'm not really sure. So because of that, this may very well be the only country artist I ever talk about on this series. The point is, someone who has no knowledge of country whatsoever, even I feel like I knew Shania Twain's music really well. By the way, I'm going to totally ignore whatever comments Shania Twain might have made in the past maybe month or so. I'm not going to touch on that at all. I refuse to let this show become about contemporary politics in any way. This is an escapist show. This is for hiding from the present. I'm just trying to take it back to maybe a simpler time for most of us, or for those of us who were there at the time at least. So Shania Twain grew up in a town called Timmins in Ontario, and she was born Eileen Regina Edwards originally at birth in 1965. And this is a true rags to riches story. I mean, whatever else you want to say about Shania, girl paid her dues. Her life sucked, especially when she was growing up as a kid. I mean, her career essentially started when she was 8 years old because her family was so dirt poor she started singing in bars to try to earn a little extra money for them. Her parents split up when she was 2 years old. Her mother remarried. Basically, as soon as she graduated high school, started singing in a bunch of different bands. Here and there, doing some covers, and played in a band called Long Shot at one point. And then in 1984, she was noticed by this DJ in Toronto named Stan Campbell, who took her to Nashville for the first time to try to record some demos, try to get a little bit of a career started for her down there. It didn't really work out right away for her. I mean, she had just so many setbacks, struggles, and difficulties even trying to get her career started. She spent about 10 years just going back and forth between the United States and Canada and just trying to get something off the ground for her, and just encountering a lot of obstacles and stalling and moving in these fits and starts, but she kept at it. In 1985, a country singer named Mary Bailey actually put her up in Nashville for some time. And then about 1986, she met John Kim Bell of the Canadian Country Music Association. He was a conductor. And that led to her first real break, I think, came in about 1987 when she performed with Bernadette Peters, Don Ross, and the Toronto Symphony Orchestra at a fundraiser event for the National Aboriginal Achievement Foundation. And during all this time, when she's kind of moving through these different mentors who were taking her under her wing and trying to help her get things started, she expressed on numerous occasions a desire to kind of become more of her own artist, move a little bit away from country and go more towards a rock and pop direction. And she kept getting discouraged because of that, because she hadn't been established enough yet to kind of take ownership of the direction of her career. She didn't quite have that kind of experience where her ideas were being met with a lot of cooperation. And then later on in 1987, both of her parents who raised her died in a car accident, and she had to actually move back home to Timmins to help to raise her surviving siblings. So that was another setback for her. I mean, can you imagine just going on through all of this? It must have been tempting to pull the plug on at least a couple of occasions. So after she had taken some time off, she did manage to record a demo and got signed to Mercury Nashville Records. And this is when Eileen Regina Edwards becomes Shania Twain. She claimed that it was an Ojibwa word, which means on my way, but I don't think they were ever able to verify that. So on her first album, she was very dissatisfied with how it turned out. She expressed this later on in her life. It wasn't very successful. If she had had more artistic control of it, I'm sure she probably would have made a bigger impact at the time. But as it was, I mean, she wanted to establish herself as a singer and a songwriter, and she only has songwriting credits on one song on this album, and the rest of it is just stuff that, you know, they wanted her to record at the time. So, and she didn't really have much say in it. She had to record what they wanted her to. So this is very typical country stuff. It doesn't seem to stand out to me all that much, even someone who has a really limited knowledge of the genre. This is called Dance with the One That Brought You. Her voice at this stage in her career sounds like she's really trying to affect the country style of singing more so than in her later stuff where she becomes more famous. This just sounds like very typical country to me. It sounds like it sounds very anonymous, basically. It sounds like it could be anybody. I don't hear a lot of the Shania that she became well known for being. So this is the one song that she contributed to the songwriting. It's called God Ain't Gonna Get You For That. I feel like I noticed a little bit more of the difference in the melody here. It's a little more distinctively written. It has a structure that follows the pop style of new songwriting a little bit, I think. The hooks are a little bit stronger on this one. Honestly, most of the songs on this album are not good at all. Most of them are in this vein of sort of sad, depressing country ballad. This one's called There Goes the Neighborhood. The production seems really lifeless and sterile to me, too. I'm not sure what other country sounded like at this time, but I can't imagine this stood out too much. See, she's trying to put a little attitude in it. She's trying to put a little more style into it, but there's only so much she can do, I guess. So after her debut album, Shania met the producer who would change the entire course of her career, a man named Robert John Mutt Lange, who was, by that time, already a fairly legendary producer for his work with AC/DC, Def Leppard. He had produced the biggest hit single of 1991, Bryan Adams' Everything I Do It For You. And they seemed to have a connection right away. Basically, they met each other face-to-face for the first time in June of 1993, and they were married by December of that year. So they started a creative and songwriting and romantic partnership immediately, which took both of their careers to new heights of success commercially. I don't quite think they had the formula down right away, though. On her 1995 album, The Woman in Me, that's her first collaboration with Mutt Lange. It still sounds a little too rooted in the country style. Obviously, somebody like Mutt would share her sensibilities with wanting to make an album or wanting to have production that was a little harder edged and a little closer to the rock and pop style production that he was doing. It didn't come with it right away. Like, there's nothing on this that sounds like Highway to Hell, that's for sure. But, you know, they are starting to get a little bit closer. There's a little more swagger in the tracks. This is Any Man of Mine from her 1995 album, The Woman in Me. Now, this sounds like definitely more pop country. Okay, this does go a little bit harder than her previous album did. It's still got all of that country flavor all over it, though. She's not quite breaking out of it yet. You know, at least these are her own compositions at this point. This is where, basically, every song here is being written by her and Mutt Lange. This is a song called Whose Bed Have Your Boots Been Under? Apparently this one was kind of a hit. I don't remember any of these songs at all, to be honest. I mean, granted, I wasn't listening to country at all, but I don't think most of this stuff crossed over very much. I'm sure it was more successful than her first album, but not by enough that, you know, the average pop music listener would have heard it. Oh, this song was from the Twister soundtrack. This is called No One Needs to Know. For some reason, there are a lot of collaborations with men on these albums. It's kind of surprising to hear coming from her. To me, she always came across as one of those country singers who wanted to really sound independent and sound like she didn't need a man. I guess that didn't come until later. Okay, so then in 1997, she released her album Come On Over. Let's see if we hear any difference on this one.
Let's go, girls.
Okay, I don't know if this is even still country anymore. This is the song Man, I Feel Like a Woman, the opening track on Come On Over. I don't have any way of proving this for sure, unfortunately, but you know, if this song is not a drag show staple for the last 20 years, then I don't even know what we're doing as a society. So, you know, it's got this kind of saxophone imitating guitar riff that's like pretty openly campy, but at the same time it grabs you a lot harder than anything on the first two albums. And here, especially in the hook, her singing especially sounds a lot less country inflected than it did before. This is basically a normal pop song, from what I can tell. You know, there may be a few token flourishes of country-style instrumentation here or there, but they're not dominating the production. I think that's the difference on these tracks compared to her first two albums. It's sort of the same with this one, too. This is kind of just a normal pop ballad. This song is called From This Moment On. I have to assume this was a pretty big wedding singer staple at the time. I remember hearing it at a lot of talent shows. There's really not much difference between this and something like Celine Dion, fellow Canadian. Yeah, especially in the production, in the instruments and the music that they're playing, there's really nothing country in there at all. And you know, it's pretty much the smartest career move she could have possibly made. I'm going to pause now to just list off some of the accolades that she ended up getting by releasing this album, Come On Over. Biggest album ever released by a woman. The 8th biggest selling album ever in the United States. Biggest selling country album ever. And she won 4 Grammy Awards for the songs from this album. For You're Still the One, Come On Over, and Man, I Feel Like a Woman. To this day, this album has sold almost 40 million copies total. In spite of all that, it never hit number 1. It topped out at number 2. And ended up spending 99 weeks in the top 20, which is the longest run ever. Move over, Dark Side of the Moon. Of the 16 songs on this album, 12 of them were released as singles. I could go on with these facts. This album was massive. I don't even know if albums like this still exist anymore. You know, you'd have to have been living under a rock to not have heard most of these songs. Here's another one, That Don't Impress Me Much. Now, I've always had my reservations about this song. Musically, going back to hear this, all I can hear is early Taylor Swift now. I mean, with better hooks, obviously. Taylor Swift's songwriting is not this tight.
Okay, so you're a rocket scientist. That don't impress me much.
Hell, she even looks like Taylor Swift in this video. I don't know if I can ever forgive her for it, to be honest. You know, I feel like I've grown to appreciate or at least tolerate most of these songs more than I used to be able to. But as far as the consequences long-term go, I don't know if I can chalk it up to being a net positive. Here's the other love ballad from this album called You're Still the One. And again, there's very little country style going on in it at all. Maybe a few of her voice cracks in the chorus sound a little bit like country singing, but for the most part, it's totally gone. This may not be my genre specifically, but when I listened to this album, I can't exactly say that its success was not totally merited. I admittedly have not heard a whole lot of other country albums from this time, but I can't imagine that the majority of them have strong, sort of hook-oriented pop songwriting. I don't think anything else was touching this in those terms at the time. I mean, this is a massive album. Her first album was barely 30 minutes long. This is over 1 solid hour long, and there isn't really that much filler on it. There's a couple of songs that sort of fall flat, but here's a song that sort of sounds like Every Breath You Take by The Police. Every breath you take. This song's called I Won't Leave You Lonely. This song's called Rock This Country. So they all sort of operate in this same mode. This is pure crossover. This song's called Love Gets Me Every Time. This actually does kind of sound like a country attempt at an AC/DC song. Shania Twain never released any other music in the 90s. Frankly, she didn't have to. That album, I think, was enough. If that had been the only thing that she released throughout the entire decade, she probably would have hung around for a good long time. But her next album didn't come until about 2002, and it was called Up. And in 2004, she ended up going on a pretty long hiatus, and later on revealed that she had Lyme disease, which was affecting her singing voice at the time, so leaving her unable to perform. She did eventually come back about 10 years after that. But yeah, I hate to say it, but I think she probably is one of the most influential musicians from this time period to this day. I mean, she definitely changed the genre that she was operating in forever. Still to this day, I don't think there's anyone who's really come close to that level of success. You can say maybe Taylor Swift, but talk to me when Taylor Swift does her entire career with one album, because that's basically what Shania Twain did. Next time I'm going to try to talk about genres that I'm a little less ignorant about. I like to try to go beyond my comfort zone occasionally, but I think there's probably a limit to me doing that, and we're going to be looking at a lot more familiar stuff from here on out. So until next time, I am the J. Quio. This was Bad 90s Music, and I'll see you sometime in the future.